what is the purpose of the 45-degree brush cuts? Where exactly are you talking about? Oh, you're just talking about in general, like these here. That's to prevent light leaving. Welcome, everybody. I put the, I usually use colored blocks like the green or red, just so I know where I want to place blockers. I don't know exactly what that's going to be yet, whether it's going to be like a big tree or a mausoleum or whatever else. Oh, it's super important to keep on the grid at all times. Even if you're all the way down to the corner grid, you want to make sure you're on the grid at all times. Now, there are certain things like with prefabs, it's not so important. That's kind of the purpose of prefabs, is that they don't need to be on the grid. There's no harm in actually snapping them, snapping a prefab's origin to the grid. But chances are you, in 99% of cases, your geo is not going to snap to the grid inside the prefab. But even with these curves here, you know, I've been snapping them to the grid each time I'm moving them. You know, they're on a pretty low grid. It's probably just half grid, or half unit. But they're all snapped, and I'll keep snapping them. And it's just the neat freak in me. I like to make sure everything is snapped and nice and neat. So to answer that question about sizing the interior and exterior of a building, the most important thing for me is that it lines up to the major grid. So the question is, let's say draw a quick brush here. So the outside here, you have the outside here and the inside here. Now the question becomes: is your map going to? Is the player going to see more of the exterior or the interior? Because textures are authored to line up to the major grid. So if I were to bring this down to here, so that's 64 units. Turn off game view. Alright, so that's a 64 by 64 piece right there. So if I put a texture on this, it's going to line up perfect. So shingle probably wasn't the best choice because there's a lot of very small bits in there that probably won't line up. But something like this. So the question is, do you want is the player going to see more of the inside or the outside? If the player is going to see more of the outside, then I would build it this way. If the player is going to see almost all inside, then I would move the brush this way and make sure that the inside lines up with the major grid. Does that make sense? Is my mic too low? Music's too loud? Sorry, I'm working on it. This ain't no mushroom cloud playing mother. This ain't no time space continuum. Suicide was once my Valentine. Now she's lying beside me under the sun. So long as she to get a proper high. Hit the streets and ask anyone. Is this better? Okay, well, I boosted the mic and turned the music down pretty much as low as it's going to go. I apologize. Is this better? Okay, cool, thank you. Well, before when you said there was some kind of weird bass feedback, I had boosted the mic by 10 decibels, so I undid that and turned the microphone level up from 70 something to 100. So I'm doing my best here, guys. I'm sorry. So there's a couple different ways you could do that. It's called mitering a brush, creating that 45-degree angle. You could use excuse me. You could use the edge tool by pressing E this way, or you could actually just cut it using the clipper. Or if you need to have two opposite angles on your brush, you could skew it. And to skew, you're just holding Control, left click and drag. So this level, as was suggested on Twitter, is going to be a church with a graveyard. So we have the church pretty much blocked out here. The full interior. It's a very basic layout, and I'm sure I'll end up changing a lot as I go along. But for now, it has everything it needs: spawn closets and at least a wall buy and one perk buy. Sometimes I like to plan out a map. In the case of something like Meadow, I made that up as I was going along. But I've made that's my most common style of map I've made with the mod tools. So I can make you know, a forest or nature environment in my sleep. I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging about that. It's just that's kind of my default when I don't know what to do. That's the easiest thing for me to do. Are you talking about, you said the shift click thing to extend probes? Are you talking about just resizing the bounds, or are you talking about feathering their bounds? So with the reflection probe, drop one in here. With the probe selected, you can resize it just like a brush. So I left click and drag. If you're talking about feathering, that should be Control, Shift, and left drag. And that is the blend amount, from the inside being the interior bounds and the right side being the exterior bounds. So out here, the far right side would be, basically consider this like 0 alpha, and the inside being 100. So the more distance you have, the more it feathers, the smoother a transition you have. So it's good to do this between rooms or going from inside to outside. Yeah, guys, I'm gonna limit questions to what I'm working on here. Unless we're talking about just like general mod related stuff. I usually test by myself for a while. I'm fairly confident with my experience that I know what I need to do to get the map to run. But at a certain point, of course, I always want people to help test it and make sure that that everything works so it doesn't blow up on release day. Yes, this will be a standard zombies map. Sorry guys, there's a certain function I'm looking for and I'm just spacing out on what it's actually called. There we go. That's the one I was looking for. Oh no, is that really you, Kevin? No pressure, my boss is watching. Yeah, I think I'm going to get these roads all linked up first. Or, I'm sorry, not roads, but paths. And then start working on some foliage placement. At least some larger foliage placement. Some trees, bushes, rocks, grave markers, that kind of stuff. Cool, well thanks for stopping by. Hopefully you'll see you at the next one. Yeah, this is just the way I prefer to work with laying out paths. It's easier for me to start with curves and eventually convert them to terrain.
Wise men once said, life's just a ride, only illusion.
No, everything I'm working on now is the playable space.
Goes up and down, thrills and chills, around and round. But I feel that pale death creeping in. I see my mother's face now grieving. I feel that pale death creeping in. This must be the dead end of the road. A wise man once said, the eyes of love see us all as one, as below so above. Far from the rainbow, the storms roll in. As soon as they're here, then
Oh no, all the green stuff is just meant to be. It could be end up being buildings or just you know, blocks of foliage that are meant to block the player. I threw these in to block out some elevation changes. Of course, the terrain's not going to be perfectly flat like it is now. So the idea I had the other day when working on this was that we would have 3 paths to choose from outside of the church that would ultimately link up together, but I'm just trying to think of, you know, I had this idea of doing the bridge here and having this path connect, or not connect, but cross underneath, and I'm trying to figure out what exactly to do with this guy up here, and again, how to tie them all together. Nope, gotta find more music to play. Oh, yeah, sure. I could do something like that. Add another building on the grounds. That could be really any of these green blocks here. And these are really just kind of, you know, threw these in quickly just to have something there. So they don't have to be this size or exactly where they're placed. Yeah, really the best thing you can do to save yourself time and headache is to start small. When you're figuring out the layout of your map and how everything's going to flow, keep everything as simple as possible. I know it's tempting to try to, you know, to want to just jump in and start detailing that building and, you know, share screenshots because it's really, that's, you know, for me that's the most fun part too, but realistically you're just going to end up wasting a lot of time. Well, for this church, this is just going to be a very generic church. This is not really going to have any specific theme to it. That's not a bad idea. You know, maybe this is the starting point for something like that. To do like video tutorials or even just written tutorials. Maybe. So for something like this intersection that I've done right here, this is super sloppy and I would never leave it this way. This is, again, just for blocking out purposes. Eventually, when I start cleaning this up, I'm going to turn this all into terrain meshes and probably cut this guy here and then start welding all these lines together and creating more subdivisions and more patches to fill in the spaces. But yeah, it's never a good idea to have anything intersecting, geo-wise. You don't want brushes or meshes intersecting or overlapping like this. And as much as I love Metallica, I'm going to find something a little bit more modern to listen to right now. That's better. See you around. Thanks for coming. As someone who used to play drums in a metal band, I can tell you it's not easy. That's a good question. I have to see how this ends up shaping up in terms of how it's going to be probed. Ideally, you'd want to do it area by area. So if we have like a big chunk over here that's all kind of connected, then we could probably get away with doing one big probe here. But I wouldn't want to probe this area and this area together, or I wouldn't do just like one big probe to this whole thing. You want more specific lighting, and the probes in Black Ops 3 are much different than they were in World at War, which was back then they were strictly only for reflections, like you would see in water or in the scope of a sniper scope. With this engine, they actually influence the lighting quite a bit. Well, yeah, the zones could be a good indication of how to probe out the map. Typically, you would want to follow similar bounds for both. But that being said, you don't need to. So you wouldn't need to say, well, my zones follow this, so I need to probe it this way or the other way around.
Everything repeats. It's easier to cut us down and point our defeat. It's easy to be right when everything repeats.
I think we're getting pretty close to a stopping point, so I'm going to put on a different song that I'd rather listen to. Hey Wild, for the streams we're just going to be focusing on answering questions about modding.
twilight. I've been pushing you to the edge. When you say my name, the poison on your tongue, the lies they tell, they don't mind. I am the only one. You never turn your back. You didn't need to see. 'Cause even in the dead of night, you find your way to me.
Yeah, someone else has suggested that too. I'm trying to show active keys. If there's a way to do it, I'd love to know how. If you wouldn't mind, send that to me on Twitter so I don't forget about it. And thank you. Oh, so I converted the curve into a terrain and then cut it. onto a new band. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, this is fun for me to do, but it makes it even more fun to know that I'm helping you guys out too. Or at least providing some kind of entertainment, at least. Cool, see you next time, dude. Thanks for coming. Oh yeah, whoops. I keep forgetting that I have caps lock set to push to talk, so my mic is off unless I'm holding the key. But caps lock is also my extrude vertice key. So as you can see here, I accidentally just extruded this quite a few times just trying to talk. Yeah, after I'm done with this little bit right here, I'll go over the spiral staircase thing again. I think the original was Alt-O. Yes, you can look it up in the key binding menu. You can press Control-K to open up key binds, and then you can just search for any keyword like extrude. Okay, spiral staircase. Let's make it a really big one. Like 512 by 512. Alright, so what I did was just drew out a brush, just a 512 by 512 brush. I'll go over this super in depth, just in case, you know. I'm sorry, a lot of times I probably just assume that it's a different method from talking to someone over YouTube than it is like talking to someone face to face. So I apologize for that. I may have been skipping a lot of important steps. You can add all those shortcuts by you press Control K to go to the keybind window, and then check Edit Toolbars, and then anything you want in any shortcut you want. Let's say like textures, texture lock on vertices. I can drag this up here, and now I have a shortcut for that. And if I don't want that, with this still checked here, I can just drag this into any space here and remove it. So I included a lot of shortcuts like changing different banks like exposure bank, fog bank, then convert to terrain mesh, curve mesh, create bevel cylinder, square cylinder, bookmarks 1 through 3, clear bookmarks, stamp prefab, curve to terrain, faces to terrain, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so the spiral staircase, 5 by 12 by 512 by 512 brush. Duplicate that and make it a curve. Let's do a 3 by 3. So what you want to do is make this half of the 512. So make it a 256 by 256. Then basically what you want to do here is turn this into a quarter cylinder. So select that top row. This may be a little bit sloppy, but this is the way I like to do it, is grab the center row and just move it out of the way. Grab the top row, press Shift D to rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And then put it right there so you have like a square shape. Then grab the center row. Or you could actually do this one by one. This is pretty easy. You're just going to do a 45-degree angle. So this far right vert here will go down here. This middle one will line up right here in the middle, dead center. And then this one will go in the top left. So a quarter cylinder. So from here, you know, just to make it a little easier to see, I'm just going to drag it up. It depends on how many stairs you want. Right now, if I were to convert this into a terrain mesh, this could be a lot of stairs. And it just means you're going to end up with a steeper staircase. So it's probably better to you do shift bracket left and right to control the density. So I believe this is probably the best one, I think, for doing a staircase. So I already have a shortcut up here somewhere for curve to terrain. So hit that, convert that to a terrain, and then press V to display the vertices. And you want to cut these along each row. So you press Shift and left click. Do it again to get this. Oh, it's that damn caps lock again that keeps getting me. I didn't mean to extrude. So with the vert showing, you want to... There we go. I actually undid converting it. Okay, so it's a terrain again. So yeah, you want to select not this column, we want to select this row here. So you may have to press Shift left click a couple of times to get that row. Then after that's done, oh, I did it again. You press Control-Shift-X to split. And now this should have two separate pieces. So you do that for every step. And now you have a series of steps. So I found the easiest way to do the next step is to press 3 to switch to your grid 4. Go to your side or front view. Deselect your bottom step. Press Shift and arrow up twice. I'm sorry, not Shift, it's Alt and arrow up twice. Then deselect your second step and keep repeating this process. So that gives you the height. Or that gives you the height to your staircase. Also keep in mind that's just a quarter of the staircase. So what I like to do here is make this a func group, just so it's easier for me to select. And do Alt, Shift, and left click to select the whole thing. Then duplicate, rotate, put it in place, adjust the height. Now you have half a staircase. Now you'd probably want to do the rise too before you started duplicating. Otherwise you have to do it again for each one. So that's basically it. Does that cover everything you were hoping for? Did I skip anything? Yeah, it's an old trick that has worked since the beginning and still works. And that was how I did this guy over here on one of the previous streams. Well, as you said yourself, it's super easy. Oh, it doesn't really matter what size grid you're on to draw out the brush. I think the most important thing to consider when you're starting it is that you want to give yourself enough room to work. So if you had a really small room, you wouldn't try to do a spiral staircase, because it's basically just going to be almost a vertical brush. So you really need a much larger space. Like, you would never try to do like a spiral staircase like in a 64 cylinder. 256 I think would probably be the minimum. Oh yeah, if you're having trouble keeping the verts on the grid or just moving them around, it's always best to work on the highest grid possible. Clipping stairs like this is a very slow and tedious process, but absolutely necessary. Especially considering these are made from terrain. If you want to remove something from the, are you talking about down here, like the favorites dialog? If you want to do that, you just have to go through the entity browser, search for whatever you want, right click, and go to remove favorite, or toggle favorite. Very simple. Yes, so right now what I'm doing is I'm kind of rebuilding the shape of the stairs with brushes. Right now I'm just using the green just so it's easier to see. So after this is done, then I'm going to have to start dragging each vert row up to form a ramp, which will look like this. And to give you an idea of what that process looks like. That's it. So like I said, this is not the most entertaining part, but you know, not every aspect of level design is as exciting as detailing. Alright, that's the last one. We'll start ramping these upward now. Select the brush vert by... So select the brush, press V, and then Control and left click on one of the verts. And then you can use the manipulator handles. Just about done here. Last one. There we go. So that's a perfectly clipped spiral staircase, or at least rounded staircase. I think the most difficult part for me is, I think I've said this before, is just creating a fun and unique layout. You know, everybody likes to play differently, and you know, if you make a map specifically just for one type of player, then you're going to piss off all the other players. So you have to try to find some kind of middle ground. And at least for me, you know, when I make a map, I want it to look different. I don't want anyone to look at it and say, "Oh yeah, it reminds me of this map because it looks just like it." That's why I find it works best for me to not try to overthink things. So, for example, I was having a little bit of trouble figuring out exactly how to tie all of this together here. So, instead of just sitting here and staring at it for an hour and trying to force an idea to come, what I started doing was just working on something else. Like, I know I want to do this, so I'm going to do that for now. And, you know, something may just pop into my mind later, and all of a sudden, hey, that's what I want to do with that. So I'll come back to that and then do it when a more solid idea is there. Okay guys, well, I think this is a good stopping point here. Alright guys, thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time.